Well, the war in Russia and Ukraine seems to have intensified over the past few days. Now, let's get to you all of the intriguing reports emanating from the war. Let's start with the Ukraine war. Putin telling Russia his war objectives are still unchanged. Russian President Vladimir Putin has told Russians that peace with Ukraine will only take place when they achieve their objective. While he's holding his first major news conference since he launched his first full scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Mr. Putin has combined his annual direct line phone calling with Russians with an audience of journalists. Well, the annual event took place last year. Mr. Putin's of Russian sovereignty.
Oh well, another report says South Korea's Chinese Russian enter defense zone. Now, Mr. Putin has combined his annual direct line rather, in with Russians, with an audience of journalists. The annual event didn't miss last year, but is taking place this year. Mr. Putin begins the marathon event by speaking about the importance of Russian sovereignty. Going further, South Korea's military told that it has deployed fighter jets in response to Chinese and Russian military planes flying into its air defense zone unannounced. Four Russian and two Chinese aircraft crossed into the Korean Air Defense Identification Zone (CADIZ) over the Sea of Japan, also known as the East Sea, between 11:53 a.m. that is 2:53 GMT and 12:10 p.m. that is 3:10 GMT on Thursday, and then deported. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff (JCS) said this in a statement.
Now let's get to find out other war-related stories. U.S. intelligence assessment says that nearly half of the Israeli munitions dropped on Gaza are imprecise dump bombs. Nearly half of the air-to-ground munitions that Israel has used in its in its war torn. Nearly half of the air to ground munitions that Israel has used in Gaza in its war with Hamas since October 7th has been unguided, otherwise known as dome bombs, according to the new U.S. assistance. The assessments compiled by the Office of the Director of the National Intelligence and described to the CNN by three sources who have seen it says that about 40 to 45% of the 2009 air-to-ground munitions Israel has used have been unguided. The rest have been precision-guided munitions. Now that's what the assessment said. So unguided munitions are typically less precise and can pose a greater threat to civilians, especially in such a densely populated area like Gaza. The rate at which Israel is using the dumb bombs may be contributing to the soaring civilian death toll.
While still on the global scene, Ukraine has figured out a new way to win battles, starting by grounding Russian drones. Well, it is not for no reason the Russian assault on Avdiivka, a key Ukrainian stronghold in eastern Ukraine Donbas region, seems to be stalling out. There are indications the Ukrainians have deployed their new drone and counter-drone strategy, targeting the radio jammers the Russians use to ground Ukraine's drones while setting up their own jammers to ground Russian drones.
Well, moving on, the Russia blindsides China. Now, the Kremlin is discrediting China by continuing to import components, military equipment, and dual purpose goods under the international sanctions. It is mostly likely that Moscow uses military intelligence not just the intelligence, but also its channels to ensure the purchase of scarce goods and components. The war between Ukraine and Russia has truly emerged as a war of drones. Now, while Iran and Turkey produce large military grade drones used by Russia and Ukraine, the cheap consumer drones that have become ubiquitous on the front line says to have come from China.
Well, moving on, Zelensky meets with Biden and lawmakers in push for more Ukraine aid. President Joe Biden reiterated U.S. support for Ukraine in a news conference with President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House on Tuesday as he called on the U.S. Congress to pass a new aid package for Kyiv. Early on Tuesday, Biden announced an additional $200 million in drawdown funds for Kyiv. He warned during the news conference that Russian President Vladimir Putin is counting on the U.S. to fail to provide support to Ukraine. Zelensky also met with U.S. lawmakers Tuesday on Capitol Hill to advocate for more aid as discussions remain stalled in Congress. Lawmakers still appear no closer to a deal tying immigration and border policy changes to the package that will provide funding for Ukraine and Israel. House Speaker Mike Johnson said his conditions for Ukraine aid remains unchanged after meeting with Zelensky.